Hi, welcome to the 44th edition of the Rider Rumblings video podcast. I've committed the number of editions to memory now by using rider uniform numbers, so we do so today, or we proceed today, recognizing number 44, Roger Aldag. So next week is number 45, so we'll be Glenn Dobbs time, Mike McCullough time. So 46 is a weird number in rider history. There's no legends who've ever worn it, so I'm going to have to work on what we do a fortnight from now. Len Ortman is probably the best rider ever to wear number 46.
Well, that's interesting.
In the center, 1946 to 52. It's a really weird number. There's been no great riders or even all-star riders wearing number 46.
It's kind of one of those numbers that's not position specific.
Yeah, it's kind of all over the place. So sort of like me right now. Anyway, so for all the Roger Aldag fans out there, and they are legion, we salute him today. And we're going to talk a little bit later on about favorite rider players of all time. So I'm sure Roger's name is going to come up there as well. Our guest today, and I've been remiss in not introducing him so far in my ramblings, Tony Plater, 2007 Grey Cup champion.
Yeah, always a pleasure to be in your mom's basement to do these podcasts, Rob.
Doesn't it look like it?
Yeah. Is she going to bring us cookies like last time?
This looks so 60s. I keep waiting for somebody to bring in a hi-fi. Maybe we could fondue something afterwards.
The wood paneling's kind of creepy.
Well, we're in the midst of renovations here, and we had a really nice studio that was so nice we didn't invite you to partake in the proceedings because it was just too good for you and I to be there. But once we have our regular studio again, we'll have all sorts of nice pictures and everything. So
yeah, I've been called the Rocky Butler of podcasting here. So this, obviously the starters have been hurt and the second string guy's away. So hey, let's bring that guy in.
Well, we're gonna upgrade you to Rocky Henry, who was such a nice guy.
He was.
And they've had Rock Perdoni. Whether they had Stoney Parker as a defensive lineman once upon a time. Rock Preston. They've had lots of geologic names. Cliff Featherstone. Who else has ended with Stone? Would there have to be more Stones?
Just Rob Vanstone, who I think they should name the press box after.
No, that's got to be Bob Hughes. That's another crusade that has gone nowhere.
It should be. He's, he was a legend.
Or Lloyd Saunders, Johnny Esau, one of those great pioneers. I think would be a terrific choice, but I vote for Bob.
Yeah,
this was once his office, by the way.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
He brought a great perspective to the football fans. I remember listening to him when I was in high school on CJME, where he would do kind of the little rider report and just crush them with that Chaos by the Creek. Oh, it was so much fun to listen to.
Well, when I was starting here, I used to get tonsillitis a lot, and when my tonsils acted up, I could do a really mean Bob Hughes impersonation. It had had that sort of raspiness that Bob had, so I used to do a Bob Hughes impression, and I kind of mimicked that radio thing that he used to do. And Al Driver thought this was funny, so he used to ask me. Al was one of our copy editors. He used to ask me to phone the copy desk, and they put it on the speakerphone. And I would do my Bob Hughes impression, and so I had the tonsillitis voice over a speakerphone, so it's going to sound really crackly. It was perfect. So I really ripped off the Bob Hughes impersonation one night, and I ended it with a resounding, "This is Bob Hughes." And L. Driver goes, "No, Rob, this is Bob Hughes." Bob was walking right along the back of it. Fortunately, he had a wonderful sense of humor. And I'm still here. So.
He's one of the all-time greats in the sports reporting business, and he should be remembered somehow by the Rough Riders, I believe, just because of all he did to keep the franchise alive.
Yeah, and people remember Bob for being very critical, but what people should also remember is that when the situation was very critical, Bob was always there, front and center. The two televised telethons. How is that for redundant? The two telethons that they did, or the one in '87, the one in '97, Bob was one of the hosts. Bob was always there when this franchise needed help.
It's interesting you talk about critical times and being critical in the paper. Sometimes being critical is not a bad thing as long as it's fair. And I've always found people like yourself and Bob Hughes to be very fair in their analysis. You guys would write a story that was very critical of the team, then you'd write an unbiased middle of the road, and then you would give somebody a pat on the back. So when I was doing communications with the Rough Riders, I always looked for that pattern. And to say that that it always happened. I believe it did, because I thought you guys were being very fair. You knew the importance of the team to the public, but for your credibility, you couldn't blow smoke and say things were great when we had guys that like Leroy Paul that couldn't cover a bed with a blanket, trying to make things happen on the field. I think you guys were really honest and fair to the football club, and that's in my mind what was most important.
Well, I remember in '99, for example, that was a dismal season. They didn't win they didn't win a game after Labor Day, and you were with them in '99.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, of course, because you set up the interview, and it was late in the season, and they were horrible. Mike Saunders was having a really good year, and fortunately got injured near the end of the year and prevented it from being a really great year. But you set up the Mike Saunders interview for me that year. And I remember him walking into some little office in Old Taylor Field. He'd just gone for lunch. He came in with a McDonald's bag and sat down, and we chatted for the longest time. And it was like, yeah, this is a terrible year, but Mike Saunders is having a tremendous year. And you were in the midst of that because you lined that up for me. And, that was one of the times where you tried to extract a positive from a year that's resoundingly negative, and you need to do angle sometimes too. That team was horrible.
One of my favorite memories, as you bring things up now about interviews, is when you and I got Doug Flutie to meet your mom.
Wasn't that amazing?
That was so much fun. The look on her face just lit up the sky. It was just a really warm, and he was fabulous with her.
He was great with her.
He took extra time, and it was really a special moment. We weren't always the best on the field, but I think as an organization we tried to do a lot of the right things, and that was the philosophy that Al Ford had, and those coaches that worked under him. But I remember that moment because it was really cool, because he was on the program and your mom got a picture with him and a picture signed. So that's a special moment that stands out for me.
And you initiated that, actually. We're getting really tangential here, but it's a really funny story. The '95 Grey Cup in Regina, and my mom and her second husband, Alan, my dad died in '82 and mom remarried. And they were all over Grey Cup week. And they were outside Taylor Field one day after the Stampeders had practiced, and the Stampeders are coming up, and Mom walks up to one of the Stampeders and goes, "Oh, Doug, you're wonderful, Doug." And he posed for a picture and was really nice. So Mom, every year at Christmas, Mom gives out these photo collages as sort of highlights of the year. So she brings out, in '95, she shows us a photo collage that included Mom and the Grey Cup. Mom and during Grey Cup week, and she goes, "There's me and Doug Flutie." And I said, "Well, that's nice, but that's Dave Sapunjas." And she goes, "No." And she goes, "Yes, it is." I go, "Yes, it is." And she goes, "No," and she's crushed. And she refused to believe that it was Dave Sapunjas. So I went home, got a Stampeders media guide, brought it back, and said, "See, Dave Sapunjas." So, which I wish I hadn't done. I should have just said, "Yeah, that was really nice of Doug." She was crushed. So I told you that story once upon a time, within a year or two after that. And you said, it was you who said, "Well, the Argos are here. Why don't we get your mom to meet Doug Flutie?" And the scam was, I said to Mom, "We're upgrading your tickets for the Argo game, but I can't do it. You have to be there to personally upgrade your tickets. So could you meet me at the stadium at such and such a time?" And then when she got there, there's Doug Flutie. And I'll never forget the look on her face. It was just priceless. And they took about 7 photos. Only one of them turned out. A year later, Mom got a dog, and she named him Flutie.
And I think she was taller than Doug too.
No, it was a wonderful moment. Thank you for engineering that, because that was all. It was you, and then you and Eric Tillman were the two who orchestrated that. That was a wonderful memory for us.
Yeah, those are the kind of things that you remember. You don't always remember the wins and losses or some of the players that came in and out, but you remember those type of moments.
Yeah, those are cool, and that's one of the real, I think, charming things about following the Riders. There's so many personal stories, especially with a community-owned team. You can really get to know the people who are your heroes.
Yeah, and there was quite a few people that walked in that dressing room that made a difference in a lot of people's lives. As a fan growing up, I enjoyed watching Mike Strickland play, because he was the little running back that BC didn't want anymore, and he came to Saskatchewan, and just his work ethic and his ability to get the job done made him a fan favorite.
Yeah. They didn't have much going for him in '78, but they had Mike Strickland with 1,300 plus yards in rushing.
And then you have Lyle Wozniacki and the Woztusi dance.
Oh, I love the Woztusi.
It was him and Mike Samples playing around, and those are the kind of things that stand out. We sat in section 13 and we saw a lot of bad football. I remember one season where we cheered when the wind blew a box into the end zone.
Yes,
because it was the biggest thing that happened that game. That's the closest the Riders got to a touchdown. Should have put a logo on the box, or the things like the Willie Wilder touchdown.
Yeah, it was. It didn't take much in those days to give you a reason to try and manufacture a cheer.
We were just hoping to win the coin toss.
Oh, it was amazing. First downs were an event. Like it was, especially the 79 season, that team had virtually nothing. And there were several games that year where they finished with fewer than 10 first downs. So like a completion was a big deal. They threw 9 touchdown passes and 37 interceptions that year. And that's over 16 games. So they'd be over 40 given the 18-game schedule.
So the Rider defense this year, or this past year, had more touchdowns than the 79 Riders did on offense.
Isn't that amazing?
Wow.
Oh, my goodness. What were we going to talk about anyway?
We were going to talk about a couple of things. The favorite players.
We sort of hinted on that.
Yeah, and when I worked with the team, you saw you learned a lot of life lessons from guys like Glenn Suter and Gary Lewis, 2 real leaders on the football club. I thought as the seasons progressed and when they left the team, I thought we had a real lack of toughness and leadership, because those guys seemed to be able to draw everybody together. We still had guys like Roger and Bobby Jairus, but we did miss Gary Lewis and Glenn Suter, and I always remember what they brought to the locker room, how they could calm people down and get them refocused and get the team back to where and they were both huge assets in '89, as you know.
Yeah, it's I think we can both look at it similarly. I mean, we both grew up following the team, and then it became part of what we do vocationally. And I've always kind of separated those two lives when I look at my own perceptions of the Rough Riders. It's sort of like there's that era where I was the fan, and there's that era where since '96 when I've been covering the team, and it's a different existence. So I kind of look at players that I've really gotten to like in dealing with them for what I do for a living, and I look at sort of prior to 1996 and who were the guys I just enjoyed watching strictly as a fan, and I've always had that sort of line drawn. And it's pretty much a different constituency because the team changed quite a bit personnel-wise in the mid-90s because it was generally bad. So there's not a lot of players who are in both groups. What about you? You worked for the Riders for a number of years, and as far back as you can remember, we're watching them.
Yeah, it's interesting. I agree with you. I think you look at the players differently because you get to know who they are, and you think, hey, that's a real good guy. I hope he succeeds. Or, you know what, that guy's a bad apple. They need to get him out of here, even though he may be somebody that the fans really like. And then you see other aspects of things like a Bobby Jairus, whose work ethic was phenomenal. He was the first one there, the last one to leave. And he always took the time. If he found a rookie that wanted to learn and wanted to be the best they could be, after practice and meetings, Bobby would take the young guy out and on the field when everybody was gone, teach him techniques. I don't know why somebody hasn't hired Bobby Jairus as an assistant coach. His work ethic and his knowledge of the game and just his ability to be able to transfer that knowledge to young players was phenomenal, and I give him a ton of credit because in as you know, in sports, the guy standing behind you wants your job. Yeah. So there's a tendency to not help that guy out, but Bobby was not like that. He was bigger than life. Fans loved him, and he was. What you saw is what you got. He was a true competitor, and one of those guys that would be an asset to any CFL team.
And the enthusiasm he has would be contagious.
Oh, yes.
Absolute love of the game. I always enjoyed watching and dealing with Bobby Jairus. And he's one of those players that I liked watching as a fan, and I like dealing with, and still enjoy dealing with periodically as a reporter.
He was always going to give you his honest opinion during an interview.
Great.
He would never sugarcoat it or give you stock answers.
No, I remember the Riders lost 55-9 in Winnipeg in 1997, regular season finale, and Bobby went off. It was classic. I don't think it's coincidental that they won their next 2 games and got to the Grey Cup. He just knew what to say and when to say it.
As fans and as employees and people that cover the team, we've gotten to watch a lot of great players come through here. One of mine is Barry Willburn. I thought Barry Willburn was probably the best defensive back that's ever put on a Rough Rider jersey. And his talent was amazing. I remember him playing, we were playing Hamilton here, and he got under Earl Winfield's skin, and Earl was always yapping at him, and Barry would just walk away, do a little strut, and make sure that that he didn't catch the ball. And then he went on to do great things in the NFL after that. He's just one of those guys that stands out for you that says, hey, this guy was a true all-star.
Well, he was only that one year in 93.
Yeah.
And my goodness, what a shutdown defensive back. Just forget about throwing to whoever Barry Wilburn's got that day.
Yeah, he was phenomenal. And you see, work ethic again. A Roger Aldag. Here's a guy that comes to work, and he just made sure that he was going to get the job done.
Yeah, and always thought that someone was. He never. He went to camp every year thinking, "Oh, I got to make the team."
Yes,
it's Roger Aldag. You've won 2 Shenley Awards, and it's still, I got to make the team. Don Narcisse was the same way, and not two totally different backgrounds. You're looking at Port Arthur, Texas. You're looking at Gull Lake, Saskatchewan, but they loved it just as much.
And that's interesting. I think that's one of the challenges that coaches have in pro football is that you're getting your team, but you're getting guys from Louisiana, Texas, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Northern Ontario, and then you try to bring them together, even though all those backgrounds are so diversified, bring them together as a team and try to find a common denominator. And we've had some coaches that have been able to do that. I thought Ken Austin did a great job of that, and Cal Murphy, as well as Don Matthews.
Ken Miller, too.
Oh, Ken Miller was fabulous, yes. You're absolutely right. Ken was able to do that.
But that's, trying to put a CFL team together and make it cohesive is, to me, that's a doctoral thesis in sociology.
Absolutely.
Take all that and try and make it work.
The one thing that they have, the one thing that they do have is that they're here not to get rich, but because of the love of the game and they want to play. So I think that's that first building block. But a good coach like Ken Miller was able to make sure that those building blocks stacked up and we had the successes that we did.
So growing up, who was your favorite?
It would have been...
was it 23 or 34?
Well, you know what?
34 or 23.
Yeah, Ron Lancaster. I really liked the way he took charge on the field. He was the guy, and you knew he was the guy. And, I got an opportunity to watch him live in 77 when we moved here. And I thought, wow, there's just a presence about him. I never was able to watch George Reed play live, just on TV. And again, he was amazing. But for sitting in the stands and watching, it has to be Ronnie Lancaster for me.
Yeah, Ronnie was it when you're growing up in Saskatchewan. And Ronnie and George were it. I still remember where I was when I met Ron for the first time. It was at Regina Airport in 1971. Riders had lost to Winnipeg, and we met them at the airport and got autographs on the back of one of Mum's checks. Ron Lancaster, John Steele, Silas McKinney. The next year, I went to the Hickey Brothers Hockey School, and it was at the Kinsman Arena. Is that the one on Elphinstone?
Yes.
And I walk in there for my first day of hockey school, and who's sitting in the office with George Reed? And it was like meeting royalty. It still is. Hasn't changed. So those were the two when I started following the Riders, and then.
But those are the easy ones to say. Hey, those are the big fans. Who did you find after that? Obviously, you may have mentioned Joey Walters once or twice. Very class guy, Mr. Clutch when the ball's thrown his way.
Yeah, I became a huge Joey Walters fan very quickly. His first catch was a 39-yard, beautiful over-the-shoulder catch from Ronnie against Calgary in 1977. And from that moment, I thought, I like this player. I had a chance to meet him for the first time in 79 briefly. I had a chance to chat with him at the Golden Mile Shopping Center outside. I think it was the Met. Or was there a Kresge's? Whatever the department store was in the Golden Mile Shopping Center. It had an ice cream stand as part of the department store. And Joey was by the ice cream stand. So I went up to him and introduced myself. We chatted for 45 minutes, and then he apologized for taking up so much of my time.
Wow.
Well, that was it. I was the biggest Joey Walters fan ever, and that still hasn't changed.
And if I remember correctly, he was cut by the Bombers?
The Bombers let him go. It was ward number 73 in Winnipeg. Riders picked him up. And they had a vacancy in the receiving corps for an import because Tom Campana had suffered a career-ending injury, and Leif Pettersson had gotten hurt early that year too, and never played for the Riders again. So they had some vacancies in the receiving corps. In comes Joey Walters, and there's not a nicer human being on the planet, and just a great person to consider your favorite player. So Joey was always it for me.
You mentioned Leif Pettersson. I always thought he was underrated as a receiver. I thought he did a great job while he was here.
And when he went to Hamilton, he showed what he could have done here. The problem is, you have to beat out Steve Mazurek. You have to beat out Tom Campana. You have to beat out Red Dawson. You have to beat out Bob. They had tight ends back then, so Bob Richardson had a receiving position. So good luck to Leif Pettersson trying to beat those guys out. But as soon as he went down east, he finished off his career down east with Hamilton just in a tremendous fashion. Really nice man too.
I think you see a lot of that when players actually get a chance to play, and that's one of the virtues of the CFL, is that those kids that don't get to play maybe as much in their college years, and so they're overlooked by the NFL because they don't have that experience. They can come here and have a good, a long career in the CFL, or get the opportunity to go down and play in the NFL. His name slips my mind. Oh, Chuck Klingebill.
Yeah.
Right? He didn't get a chance. And then he comes here 2 years, and then he's a stud, Yeah,
it's an amazing story. Sadly, he died last year prematurely in his early 50s. So, news of the week. Well, there was this NFL preseason game that apparently was earmarked for Regina at one point. No more as of Friday. We still don't know why. Nobody's really saying what the ultimate deal breaker was there. But the bottom line is there's no NFL preseason game, and that's unfortunate. They built this facility to bring events like that here, not just for the Saskatchewan-roughriders, and I think that was an opportunity lost. However, it ended up not happening. It's unfortunate that it didn't come to fruition.
I agree it's an opportunity lost, not only for us to showcase Mosaic Stadium, but to showcase our city and the wonderful things that we have going on here. We're not a we're not a have-not anymore. We're not the lovable losers of Regina. I love Regina. That slogan has taken off over the years, and we're a city that has a lot of great amenities and has the ability to host world-class international events. And to have the NFL join us, I think would have been a real positive for everybody. And I'm a Raider fan. I would love to watch the black and silver play here. I'm looking forward to going to Vegas in 2020 and watch them play when their stadium is made. But I think those are the opportunities that we get to showcase our stadium and our city and the great people that live here. And like you said, it's a missed opportunity for us. And I hope we do get an opportunity at some point to bring that type of game back here.
In some circles, the Rough Riders are being blamed for the fact that this didn't come to fruition. Is that fair criticism?
I don't know all the details. I'm sure there's a little bit of blame to go to all around. As a city, we need to come together and not point fingers. And I think that's where the success will be in to bring international events here.
See, what irks me about it is the Rough Riders pointed out some issues, and I think rightly so, that could have created some logistical problems. Regardless, Evraz Place said that the stadium could be converted in time from a Friday NFL game to a Saturday CFL game. So regardless of what the Riders' position was, the people who would actually have to put on the event felt it could be done. And then the discussion turns to, well, let's talk about Thursday instead of Friday. So suddenly whatever the Riders' concerns were alleviated by the fact that a different date was an option. the hold on the stadium wasn't just for the Friday. There were other dates that were in place. So if the Riders were at fault here, I don't see how you can make a case for the Riders being at fault here, because ultimately they could have had it on a different day, and even if they had it on that day, on the Friday, Evraz Place felt the stadium could have been turned around in time. So how were the Riders to blame here? I just don't see that.
The Riders have always been good corporate citizens. I don't see them as a selfish organization. They've opened the stadium for various different events. So I don't see that. Part of the issue I would think is because it was a televised game on the Saturday. The broadcast partners have to be looked after, and I know they, if I remember correctly, they set up the day before as well. And there's the locker room guys have to get the equipment in, and so I think there's a lot of different factors that went into that decision of trying to move the game to the Thursday, and then ultimately it's the NFL's final say to say yes, we want to play Thursday, or no, we want to have this on a Friday.
Other news of the week, and I know this created a lot of discussion, Derek Taylor is a new play-by-play voice of the Saskatchewan-roughriders. That announcement was also made on a very eventful Friday. Derek has been at TSN since November 2014. Before that, he was at Global TV in Winnipeg from, I think, 2001 to 2014. He was also the voice of the University of Manitoba Bison's football team for better part of a decade. I think this is a tremendous hire.
Derek Taylor's got a lot of talent. I love the research he does during the CFL broadcast games. The little Dr. Taylor or whatever
details.
The details that he put together shows me that he's got a love for the game, and that he's got an energy. He's a very good sportscaster, and he seems to be able to do a good job with the interviews. He's got some background with the Bisons. I think it's going to be this is a prime job, and he's got, Rod Peterson was very good at what he did when he was on the air. Absolutely. So Derek's got some big shoes to fill, but I think they hired the right guy to come in and to fill those shoes.
I think he's got some big shoes to fill when you look at the job Michael Ball did in the interim. Between Rod leaving and Derek being hired, Michael Ball hosted a lot of editions of the Sports Cage and on CKRM and did just an absolutely phenomenal job.
Michael's very committed, and he's got a great football background, playing with the Rams and then doing some of the Ram broadcasts. Very, very dedicated and talented individual. I think too many people would have missed him in the morning. So
yeah, he's that show is so good and such a hit that you wonder, when you look at having that as a property in your CKRM, maybe you just don't want to mess with that, because he's such a presence on that show and is so very good at doing that. And he was doing the morning show and he was doing the Sports Cage. I mean, that was amazing service and just an amazing job by Michael, and I hope that gets recognized and applauded.
Harvard's been a good partner to the Rough Riders and to the community, and I think that Michael has done a great service for the community. His morning show is awesome. They're great in the mornings. They make you laugh. They get you going in the right mood. And you're right. He did a nice job on the Sports Cage. But I'm glad he's going to be on the morning show, because in that way, my mornings will start with a smile.
There may be another Ball down the road. Who knows? Ethan Ball may end up playing for the Rough Riders one day. What a football player!
The young man has got some talent, and I look forward to seeing him as he continues to progress.
We had a message from a reader, and I was remiss in not addressing this earlier, because we do invite readers to contact us with questions or suggestions or whatever, and this can be done by emailing me at rvanstone@postmedia.com, which is the first time I haven't choked on saying that correctly. rvanstone@postmedia.com. I nailed it. Rod Fink sent us a note, and we mentioned a few weeks back that we were going to be talking about favorite players, and he said, you could probably do a show just on Ronnie and George. Mm-hmm. And George turns 80 on October 2nd, so I think we're going to be doing a George Reed show in the fall. But he mentioned some other players: Rhett Dawson, Steve Molnar, J.J. Barnagle, the hybrid of John Huffnagel and Joe Barnes in 1981. How can you forget Ray Algar? I loved watching Ray Algar. Roger Aldag, Bob Poley, Gene Mikowski, Weston Dressler. And I think there were 3 players who played for the Rough Riders that Rod didn't name. I mean, we could fill, I think, a show on each one of those players, and everybody's got their own personal favorites. I loved watching Ray Algar. Ray Algar was a football player, and in the open field, when Ray got the ball, and there's 6'3", 220 against, say, Anthony Drawhorn, a diminutive, overmatched defensive back. Like, it was so much fun to watch Ray Algar. I loved watching Ray.
He was, once he got that momentum going,
Wasn't
there was no
that great?
stopping. Oh my goodness,
was so great.
He was just a wrecking ball, that, and it's to watch his progression as a young Canadian coming into the CFL. There's a lot of talk about the ratio right now. But if you don't have that number of Canadians, then Ray Algar doesn't get an opportunity to develop into the superstar and Hall of Famer that he is, and that we enjoyed watching as he played. He had great hands, and there was nobody tougher.
Oh, he was a tight end playing slot back. I'm not sure we'll ever see a player like that again.
Yeah,
I'm not sure that you're going to. It's just, I think that they broke the mold after Ray Algar retired in 1996. There hasn't been I can't think of anybody of that description. There's been tough receivers, but there'll never be another Ray Algar.
No, he would rather run over you than around you.
And he could run past them.
Yes.
If
he chose to, but he'd rather run through them because it was more fun for him.
In 1994, in the 94 season, Ray scored 3 touchdowns of more than 50 yards, and he turned 35 that year. Who does that after turning 35? Like, he was very underrated as far as how he could get by people. But people remember, I think, more Jeff Fairholme running by people.
Yes.
But Ray could do it too. And I loved watching Jeff Fairholme too. Fairholme, when he had a step, it was like the Roadrunner. It was over. Like, all he needed was a step on a defender, and it was over. It was done. Like, it was uncanny how Jeff never got caught from behind.
Yeah, once he had the ball, he was gone.
It was like it's like you put the receiver on fast forward to get to the end zone. He just, what a gear.
And tough too. He'd make the catch anywhere in traffic or going deep. He was fun to watch. He was one of those guys that if you got the ball in his hands, he was a game changer.
He was basically one of the players who ignited that 89 Grey Cup. Ray Algar scored the Riders' first touchdown that day, but Hamilton countered. Mike Kerrigan hit Derek McAdoo for a touchdown, and the Tiger Cats were still celebrating that touchdown when, on the first play of the next offensive series, Ken Austin went deep for Jeff Fairholme, who was interfered with on the play, still caught the pass and went 75 yards for a touchdown. And it was that play that turned that game into a track meet, and that was just Jeff Fairholme straight fly pattern.
Yeah, you're right. That was a game changer, I think, for us, and as well. We mentioned some of those big names in the game, but the play of Mark Guy too, I thought was instrumental in the Rough Rider victory. 4
catches for 100 yards, 2 on the final possession. And he had a 52-yard kickoff return that day too. So and he had a long pass earlier in the game. People remember the 2 at the end, but he had the long pass as well.
If you're Hamilton, you're thinking, okay, I got to watch Algar, I got to watch Fairholme, and I got to watch Narcisse.
And they had to watch James Ellingson too,
yes,
who was tremendous that day.
And so Mark Guy made the most of that opportunity. And you see that a lot in Grey Cup games or championship games where there's a secondary Canadian player or a secondary American player that rises to the challenge because they're worried about the superstars on the team. Guys like Mike Mauer.
Yeah.
When he played with Edmonton.
No, it's so true. And you even look at the 2013 Grey Cup, and okay, The Hamilton's got to be worried about Weston Dressler. They got to be worried about Chris Getzlaff. They've got to be worried about Taj Smith, the Riders' 3 1,000-yard receivers that year. So Roy Simon at age 38 totally burns them for 2 touchdowns.
Yeah,
that option that you might not be focusing on at the time can get you. Now, Roy Simon was already a Hall of Fame caliber player by then. He wasn't an unsung hero, but defenses weren't really worried about Roy Simon then. They were worried about the big guys.
And he made him pay. He found ways to get, the 1 touchdown. I think you or I were closer to him than any defensive back was.
No, it was in the north end zone, and that got them rolling. And
you talk about.
Are we still on the air?
I think your mom's saying you have time for bed. It's football's a game of bounces and inches. If Corey Sheets doesn't pick up that ball that's bouncing around and Hamilton does, they score the touchdown because there's nobody but behind the defensive lineman. But Corey Sheets picks it up, gains enough yards, gets the first down, and the Riders roll on to victory.
And those are the type of things that so often worked against the Rough Riders in Grey Cups. A bad break here and there would derail them in a Grey Cup game. That's why they've lost so many of them. But that was the game where things went their way. Darien Durant fumbled 3 times that day. Nobody remembers it because breaks went their way by and large. And Darien had a tremendous game that day. And when you're talking about favorite players to deal with, Darien Durant, absolute first class.
Always there for the media or the fans. He was one of those guys that understood his role as the leader on the team.
Totally got it.
And so he was the leader on the field and off the field. In the locker room, you could depend on him to take the young guys aside and say, hey, here's the way we're going to roll. This is what's going to happen. And in the community, same thing. He always had time for the fans, always had time to make sure that our team was doing the things that they needed to do to be successful. And it's little things like that many fans may not know, but he would take his receivers out for breakfast the day before the game. You'd see him at a local establishment buying his receivers breakfast because he knew that there had to be that cohesiveness. That's the kind of leadership that you need to win championships.
Yeah, and Darien got it. And that, we talked earlier about some players who aren't from here, but become so passionate about representing this team, this province. Bobby Jairus was that way. Don Narcisse was that way. Darien Durant was that way. He's from Florence, South Carolina, but he's as much Saskatchewan as people who have a Saskatchewan birth certificate.
And they came in and they made a positive impact on the province. Don Narcisse was one of my favorites because he would attend all types of special events that people were holding. He would go to somebody's birthday party and they'd be having hamburgers and hot dogs. He'd show up and the family would go, wait a minute, I can't give Don Narcisse a hot dog. Let me get you this steak. So Don was a real leader because he would teach the young guys that if something's given to you, it can be taken away. But if you earn it, they can't take it away from you. And that comes to mind when he was in competition with B.K. Williams for a starting wide receiver spot. It was my first year with the Rough Riders. And I remember Don Matthews walking with him to the field, and he put his arm around Don and said, Don, this week it's a competitive situation between you and B.K. for the wide receiver spot. And Don won out and had the Hall of Fame career just because of his work ethic and knowing that he needed to earn something that could have been given to BK.
It seems preposterous when you look at it that they're once considering either or with Don Narcisse and BK Williams.
But sometimes you have to light that fire.
Yeah.
Right. And that's one thing Coach Matthews was able to do, was to get the best out of people and make them play to a new level. And that little conversation to the field with Don Narcisse was the start of a Hall of Fame career.
I think we've probably gone on for quite some time. Mark, how many minutes are we at now?
Just coming up on 40.
We're pushing 40 minutes, so we're getting into record territory. So we're just going to go for another 2 hours and 15 minutes, and then you can go home, Tony. Is there anything you'd like to add in summation?
No, I think the important thing is that the team continues to be the heroes that they are on the field to the young kids, and to make sure that they're going out to the RMF games and build those relationships. You see Gene Mikowski doing it with you see Marcus Adams, the people that have remained in the community and have become part of the fabric of who we are in Saskatchewan, and I think that's important. And the team needs to have the ultimate goal is to win, but I think you need to have some of those fiber guys with you as you go along.
Yeah, at my age, I'm learning that you need more fiber. I turned 55 on Saturday, not handling it well. Tony, it's been a great pleasure to have you with us once again. Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Look forward to doing this again soon. And
hopefully the starters and the backups get healthy for you.
I'm just hoping for another day at this age. I have to read this. I'm contractually obligated to do so. Please rate us on iTunes and leave a review. It helps us grow the podcasters. And once again, if you'd like to send us a question, feel free to email me at rvanstone@postmedia.com. And we'd be delighted to read the question and toss it about for a while. So, Tony, again, thank you sincerely for joining us.
My pleasure.
I'm Rob, and next week we're going to do number 45 of the podcast series. Mike McCullough, Glenn Dobbs, etc. Take care, and thanks for joining us today.